Доброе утро, уважаемые друзья, коллеги! Сегодня
Good morning, dear friends and colleagues. Today it's the third day of the International Volunteer Camp starting, and we are happy to welcome everyone who's with us this morning and everyone who's still sleeping probably. But anyhow, the day is starting. We're starting with the most interesting sessions. Ethno-volunteering, management of large volunteer online projects. And today we have Tinkai Ritova, coordinator of the projects of the Republic, and she'll be talking about what ethno-volunteering is, how to work with this project, and she'll be talking about international part of the volunteering. And I give floor to Tinkai. Good morning, dear colleagues, dear volunteers, volunteering organizations, and everyone who's interested in ethnoculture subject and giving the input to it. Yes, I'm head of the All National Project Bergimis Asomura, and I'm coordinator of the Republican volunteering projects. So the subject I'm going to talk about is ethno-volunteering and how creative thinking and correct presentation can improve the projects and get the beneficiaries interested. So you can ask a lot of questions to each word written in here, mainly because it's Kazakhstan's 2021, so there are a lot of specific features and in terms of time, in terms of country, and so on. And if you have online viewers, I would like to ask you to write in chat who the beneficiary is in ethno-volunteering, because this kind of wording raises a lot of questions. And a little bit later, we'll get back to it. So I'm interested in learning your understanding and point of view. Well, as for ethno-volunteering, well, I think everyone understands what it is. It's about international coordination, about friendship between different ethnicities and cultures, and preserving some local cultures. As for who the beneficiaries are, I'm interested in learning about that from you. So I'll have to go from afar. Because, you see, there is the line here on the slide called Management of Large Volunteering Projects. So we'll start with them. In our country, we have Be Kind project, project on prevention of bullying in schools, about creating positive atmosphere in schools. And the idea of it appeared a long time ago in the beginning of 2021 and was supposed to be offline. So the kids, around 20 kids came to Nur Sultan, to the capital, to get to learn that. And we've been talking about with them about how you do that, how do you communicate correctly, and so on. And the guys left, and quarantine started, and we had to switch to offline. And of course, a lot of risks coming with that. I don't know about Russia, but in Kazakhstan, it was quite a tricky period because suddenly everyone had to switch to remote learning, and kids were suffering and parents were suffering, not knowing what to do with that. They were lacking equipment, they were lacking laptops, internet, and everything. So it was very chaotic. And in these conditions, the volunteers were talking about how to avoid bullying. So that was the beginning. And that's the beginning, and it'll also explain us what ethno-volunteering is, and I'll tell you later on. So we started working in spring of 2020, and we decided to carry on. So in autumn 2020 and in spring 2021, the project was still on. Getting back to large online projects. Maybe for Russia, these numbers are laughable, but in Kazakhstan, we have 18 million people, which is comparable to the amount of people in Moscow. And as for school children of all the ages, we have around 3 to 4 million people. And in 3 seasons of Be Kind projects, we had around 400 volunteers taking place in that. And there were only 164 active volunteers. And we can say that those 164 active volunteers taught around 1.7% of all the school children in the country. Within the 7 months of work. So 164 people train around 2% of all the school children in the country. And I think this is quite an indicative, and this was quite an unexpected result, because the work started and it started well, but there was this question. We had online projects in parallel to that, but they were not as successful. So we started to analyze why it happened, and we realized why. Be Kind is not just the title of the project, and within these 7 months, such a community was created. Naturally, we had a lot of risks during the first stage of the projects when we got 100 people, and 80 people of them started working, and like 60 were working actively. And eventually 50 people went on to the second stage of the project. So there were just 50 people, and they were full of ideas. They were very active. So they went to this offline meeting, they met each other, they met us, and they were very motivated and energetic. But what about the rest? And there are huge risks working with volunteers online. There's one coordinator working with them, and there are several hundreds of volunteers. What kind of volunteers these guys have? Are they young people? Are they adults? What kind of motivation they have to talk to school children? Who gets access to school children? How sincere they are in their motivation? Maybe they have some additional ideas they want to communicate. So there are a lot of risks. And also how you control the responsibility. When it's offline, you've seen it, you get some kind of relationship with this person, you understand the responsibility. But as for online, the volunteer can switch the phone off, miss or skip the lesson, and the whole school came to a single room all together to listen to that, and then it doesn't, and then the volunteer doesn't appear there. And I'm not mentioning the bullying from the outside, which is very important. So this Be Kind title of the project, it's Western language and so on. There were a lot of attacks on volunteers from parents, but we managed to go through that. And the risks that I was mentioning, they didn't happen in real life, thank God. But why it happened the way it happened? We realized the following. There were inherited values and ideology. So those 50 to 80 people who met offline, who started liking each other, created the core of the community. And when new volunteers were joining, they were sharing their atmosphere. This idea of skipping work for 5 minutes to get connected to Zoom, and so the volunteers are very, very motivated, and they are really invested into preventing bullying, and many of them came across bullying in their life. But there were not only these active people, and And there were people coming who want to work just to get a certificate. But even that worked, because people who want just to achieve some paper certificate, they are very loud in talking about the projects. So all that worked really well. And even the external bullying made the team get tighter together. The team who hasn't, people within which haven't seen each other in real life. People or volunteers living in different cities and so on, but they were working on the same thing. And the negative examples I was mentioning, and we'll understand how ethno volunteering is relevant here. But anyhow, there were school projects where they created their communities. These are the schools we were joining online, and they were talking about their projects. And we had the project on plastic, on preventing accidents, and so on. So all these projects worked really well, and volunteers were taking part in many projects. So it's a usual thing when a volunteer takes part in several projects at once. And were online projects which were not stable, like quarantine, well, useful quarantine. And a lot of volunteers joined it, around 4,000 people in 3 months' time. Wow, that's a big number. And they didn't create such a community. Why? Probably this idea of, if you are in quarantine, don't waste your time, and the idea prevent bullying, use less plastic. Maybe these things are not comparable in terms of their weight. And the understanding came that the main point was about the message. Inclusive community is quite an ambiguous example, because this project didn't create community. It was media volunteering. There was no communication with specific audience. It was about posting online, talking about inclusion and so on. And many people lost their energy. There was no powerful movement created. And I want to say it straight away. Of course, we cannot talk about some volunteers being good, some volunteers being bad, and that's not a right thing to work for the certificate. We cannot compare them. All of them have their own motivation, and all of them are being helpful results. But the motivated people will get long-term results. But so the conclusion, most touristic one that we can draw here for this large project for Kazakhstan. And the conclusion is very simple, but it's a working and applicable one. Success and stability of the project and community is determined by the common idea or the shared idea. And this shared idea is the key thing behind volunteering. Please tell me, do we have any responses in chat regarding ethno-volunteering, about beneficiaries of volunteering? So what the shared idea of ethno-volunteering may be? Yeah, we have several replies. So the beneficiaries, who they are. The first answer is tourists, and then regional dwellers, the volunteers themselves, or the people who are interested in developing and preserving the culture. Great. Yes, and I would bring them all together. Well, maybe I'd question tourists. Yes, they'll receive their use, whether the site receives any benefits. Well, the beneficiary of ethno-volunteering is the person him or herself, because ethno-volunteering, well, you can call it this patriotic thought become invisible, being patriotic in terms of your country or your people or other peoples. It's the most powerful idea that would be shared by all the participants of the project, and it has very deep roots in a person's soul and a person's perception of him or herself. So thus you cannot compare ethno-volunteering with other volunteering even, because this is the sphere through which a person makes the cultural, the very deep ideas inside the person coming through. So now I'll be talking about ethno-volunteering projects that we have. So I want to say that this something special about it is the following. Well, it's hard to imagine people who will be working on ethnocultural projects just for the sake of certificate. It may be, it'll probably be boring for them or very labor intensive. So it would be people who are ablaze with idea who will be doing that. So in Kazakhstan, for the second year running, we have Bergamis, or national projects being implemented. Bergamis is a notion that was that appeared in the summer of 2019. It means we are together. So in 2019, it was nothing about the pandemic and so on. And this model really worked well when pandemic came. And actually, I know that 2020 in Russia had the same motto, we are together. So we were trying together to help each other. So one of the priorities for volunteering in Kazakhstan is Bergamis Morale.
So I will stop the sharing of the screen and will just speak on. Asilmura project is split into two big parts: small grants, 30 grants per around $1,200 given to an individual or initiative group or some volunteering NGO to implement a volunteering project in ethno-culture. And the other big part is community groups, volunteers across the country who express their desire to help preserve cultural heritage of the country. Here we talk not only about indigenous culture, traditions, some visual attributes of culture, but also about some up-to-date things, such as monuments of the unity of the nation or people, or monuments dedicated to the Second World War, to the heroes of the Second World War. So this is a very wide concept, very general concept associated with patriotism. At least this is the way I understand it. If there are other opinions, I'm ready to accept them too. So to organize those community groups, why did we want to organize them? We want people and young people in different regions get together and implement projects together, do something together. And we were able to do this because those community groups eventually were made of some really cool experts, scientists and archaeologists, which became part of those volunteer groups without even knowing about volunteering. They just saw the word cultural heritage and they joined those groups. Also, young people, really young, scientific support because we have uh, good contacts with researchers and scientists. We can also help those community groups recruit volunteers because every time we speak about a volunteering project, we understand that resources are needed. It doesn't mean that we are going to pay volunteers, but we need to do a lot of organizational things, engage researchers, interpreters, etc. So given all this support that was required, we realized the risks as well. We interact with those community groups online. So our grant, Bagemos Asol Mura, so the amount of the grant does not imply long travel, high travel costs. So we had to assemble those community groups online. Well, we couldn't even look into the eyes of those people to understand their motivation while it was so important. But we know that it is not really easy to pretend that you're interested in preserving the indigenous culture of the country. So the most risky thing is speculation on this cultural heritage preservation topic or agenda. Indeed, if a person is interested in the culture of his nationality or somebody else's culture, interested in the language, archaeology, or anything else like this, at some point there might be some bias into some uh, into some unconstructive things, for example. That's why we uh, decided to have those groups organized on the basis of volunteering only. Of course, it would have been possible to just hire people for a small fee and then we would have forget about volunteering altogether. Of course, there would still be a risk that people would not be active enough to contribute to those projects. But we decided to have those projects on the basis of volunteers. This was a risk, and this is a risk that archaeological expeditions, for example, having had some negative experience with volunteers, when they had volunteers willing to just to get a certificate instead of really contributing. But in spite of this negative history, we were able to perform our projects. At the same time, there were people among volunteers who were really dedicated, who were really inspired and motivated. And those archaeologists, they didn't even know that they were volunteers. Well, what I'm trying to explain is the difference between the type of volunteers. Some really just want to get a certificate of a volunteer, and others are really dedicated. And those dedicated people can do so much. I have a great group of volunteers who want to help, who want to support. They only say, please tell us what we need to do to help. So guys in Nur-Sultan worked in the National Museum and they helped to label ceramic pottery, ceramic items. Although in the past, volunteers in archaeology were expected just to dig, and that's all. And in this project, we were able to expand the concept of volunteering in archaeology and history. Also, we included some collaboration efforts, collaboration platforms to those projects. And I think a wider perspective on this volunteering effort in the cultural heritage preservation will help us do much more. Unfortunately, I told you how many things we offered, and we still offer this to those community groups, public groups, but we couldn't find leaders among volunteers who are ready to generate further projects, because people who know what needs to be done in the cultural area, they don't really understand that they were volunteers. So the difficult thing is how to approach those people, how to identify them, and how to engage them in volunteering. At the same time, there are volunteers who come to those projects. They simply want to help. But we want to merge those two, those who want to help and those who are ready to generate new projects. But those grants, they generated 30 great projects anyway, and it also generated further projects which did not win a grant, but they still need volunteers, fundraising. And I think when we consolidate those two resources, things will start working the way we anticipated in the very beginning. So coming back to my topic, creativity of a presentation, how can it engage the audience, attract attention? So we have discussed that beneficiaries are people, the country, individuals. People and the government or the country in the general sense of the word. So a creative presentation is not just something bright or interactive with some gamification, for example. So in our case, creativity is ability to adapt, ability to understand who you can approach, who you should approach, where to find people who will be responsive as a human. So I say, I offer you to become an ethno volunteer because you already contribute to preservation of cultural heritage. And in this project, you can do even more through this powerful volunteer movement. Simpler is better is another principle of so-called creativity. Maybe it is anti-creativity, but it helps a lot. Simpler is better, because when we complicate things, when we have this complexity in Untitled Murat, we had experts, interpreters, designers, everything was provided, and people were overwhelmed with all this. And some volunteers were thinking, will I be able to stand to those high standards, to meet those high standards? And as a result, we didn't really find real leaders in that audience. There was just a list of things to be done. If we had just a list of just a list of things to be done, and people were given tasks, it would have been better. But anyway, our goal is to find the right people, generate their desire to create, to go ahead with a new project, to start doing something, and explain to people that once you start doing something, support will arrive, no worries. So our goal is to inspire people and help them start generating new ideas and implementing them. So I think we will just move little by little. Well, we shouldn't overwhelm people with too many resources, because this may take people aback. Also, we should think about what may be of interest for the volunteers. I'm sure that when we say we'll give you everything, engaged, a lot of interest. But when people joined those groups, they were kind of afraid to use all those privileges. Let me go back to the topic of tourism for a short while before I finish my presentation. And of course, the main point of my talk was creativity of presentations of volunteering project. So I know that ethno-tourism is a great idea, ethno-villages where tourists come and learn a lot of new things. So what can I say? Please don't be insulted by what I'm going to say. Sometimes those ethno villages or those ethno projects turned into some kind of circus, some theater. So, for example, when you observe those ethno villages, even the materials that are used to entertain himself or herself, not because they want to understand the roots of culture. If they want to understand the roots of, they're willing to learn something really original and something really authentic. Looking for something authentic is an attribute, a characteristic of a mature tourist. So coming to ethno villages or ethno sites, bring something or keep something in their heart after those visits, except for pictures. This is my personal perspective, of course. Well, back to the creative presentation. I have this so-called red button, like a silver bullet. We have an expert, Birdalo Uspan is his name. This is a unique personality. I engage him anytime I see that people are indifferent and we need to somehow engage the audience. This person translates Beatles songs into the Kazakh language. He sings and plays the guitar. He's also an artist, and he collected names of heroes of the Kazakh culture. Oh, he has described 150 Kazakh traditions, and he also wrote a diary of John Lennon. I mean, this is a unique personality, and he basically fits any presentation, any event. And this is a vitamin that I use quite often to make people hear us. And he's very helpful in doing this. Because no matter how long you speak about good things, about patriotism, about love of your own country, nothing will come out of it, because every person will react to something unusual, bright, and eye-catching. I think that's all I wanted to say, very briefly, and I'll be happy to hear your questions. Yes, my colleagues offered several questions. I do have several questions, but I'll start with the attendees' questions. You mentioned petroglyphs. What is this? Because people do not know what it is. Oh, I'm very sorry, I used this word. Petroglyphs are pictures and signs on the rock. 4,000 years of age, or even could be younger or older. This is the whole system of signs on the rocks or pictures on the rocks. Well, one could find like huge areas covered with those petroglyphs. So, in other words, petroglyphs are pictures on the rocks of educational purpose. So a cave with petroglyphs was used. So if we look back into the past, so in those caves, young men were initiated, and sometimes even young women, with some those petroglyphs, and we have a project dedicated to it. I think it would be great for Russia and Kazakhstan to get together and maybe promote the knowledge of those petroglyphs and carvings on the rocks. More questions. You said that creators and volunteers are not always the same, but can a volunteer become a creator? Well, a lot of volunteers actually grow into project leaders and initiate a new volunteer movement. Oftentimes, this is environmental volunteering for environmental projects. Those people can be very young, 14, 15 years of age. So a volunteer can become a creator if
That happens all the time, but in ethno-volunteering, there is this big gap. I learned that I'm an ethno-volunteer in 2019, but I've been doing that starting from, I don't know, 2005. I just liked it and I did it. That's the difference between them. Well, ethno-volunteers think that, well, I'm interested in history or in archaeology and I want to preserve this sacred place or this burial or something. You think you're a volunteer? No, you're just you're ethno-volunteer. So you can be productive when you like process it inside you. But the volunteers who just joined, it's a bit early for them to create the project because they don't understand some peculiar features of it. Probably they found experts in social media. So you are the laureate of a Republican Literature Award, and you've been receiving for several years in a row. Is that right? Could you tell us a bit more about that? Yes, that's true. And this has also to do with ethno-volunteering. I was really interested in our history, culture, archaeology, and spiritual essence of the nomads. I've been studying this. I've been traveling a lot in Kazakhstan, in visiting sacred places and so on, and they couldn't fail getting transformed into writing in books because you have so much inside of you and you got to share. And yeah, it so happened that two of my novels won in the Republican literature competitions, and I carry on writing. And could you give us a little bit more about what your novels are about? My first novel is Kastaban. It's about the traveling through the country at the regular person level and at the soulful person level. So it's a parallel stories about the people living through their experience. Kastaba is a place in Kazakhstan, and I'm telling there what was happening there, how I've been feeling. And also I was creating some stories about the nature, but I perceive nature also through the cultural prism. And sorry, I hope you understand me correctly, but the nature is part of the spiritual landscape, and perceiving the nature is something closer to faith rather than a visual joy. So also Castaban book included some stories about nature, and then then I published the book Kazakhstan about our people from our modern times, and Russia is hugely is amazingly huge. Well, Kazakhstan is not the smallest one. In terms of territory, it's number 9 in the world. But in our cities, sometimes you come across so different mentalities, not to mention different words. People look differently, think differently, and I swear that has to do with the local nature, with those memorable sites, ethnical and cultural sites. And they determine the consciousness of a person. The nature shapes the mentality. Yeah, it's not an eye-opener, and Gumilev was writing about that. But Kazakhstan is a novel about Kazakhstans, about how different they are about the cool places they live in, and so on. Thank you very much. And we have a lot of questions. They say that you are a leader of many projects and so on. So people got really interested in you as a personality. I don't think we can stop them. And we'll definitely reply to other questions. And we'll tell about you on website and press releases. So don't worry, we'll learn more about Tinkai, and I'm sure that she'll give us a small interview about herself. So some more questions about ethno-volunteering. Good surfing, is it popular in Kazakhstan, and does it have to do that? So now it's your time to explain what it is to me. In Russia, we have Good Surfing project. Overall, it's an international project that is about welcoming people and having the people living in your families, and it's an exchange. And in Baikal, you have the project when they were cleaning up the caves when where some rare bats were living. So it's part of Good Surfing project. So do you have any similar projects in terms of exchange? Wow, this is amazing. This is really cool. I can tell you that I don't know anyone in the country who'll be cleaning the caves, but I have people people who were accepting visitors, and they were helping out a bit. Yeah, it's a great idea, because this is the way for you to learn about some national cuisine, music, and the way the household runs. You gave actually a great idea. I'm sure that many people heard about it. I know that at the borders with Russia, there are often meetings and contacts got the idea of a new project, and hopefully it'll be implemented. Oh, sorry, I've got more questions. I was going to thank you, and I will, but just the last couple of questions. You were saying that you had this activity during quarantine. In us, it was called We Are Together, and I think it's the same words in Kazakh language. And now we have We Are Together award, and I know that your colleagues took part in that. So please tell us, We Are Together, is it still running on after the quarantine, and what your volunteers did and do? Well, Petroglyphs, or We Are Together, was created in summer of 2019. It was the project for developing volunteering, and so it doesn't have to do with pandemic. So now we have 8 We Are Together projects, or Big Chemist projects, helping animals, helping people in difficult situation, on mentoring, on education, on environmental studies. And all of them are called Bergamas something. So they are there and they'll keep going. As for what was happening in quarantine, well, if last summer it was a big trouble and people were scared, they were staying at home, and they always needed support in terms of food and moral support, and it was running at the full speed. But now, what volunteers are doing in terms of pandemic, well, it's spreading the brochures on vaccination, and as for providing food supply, well, as of now, we have some very specific cases. Well, if some family got affected and they don't have an opportunity to go outside and buy some food, in this case, people receive help. But otherwise, it's not needed. Now, what's needed is to talk everyone to vaccination and supporting them morally on something else, something new. And as for Bergamas, it'll be running for at least about 5 years more, and hopefully it'll remain the model of volunteering forever. I hope that it'll remain in our countries too, because our project is still running. We talk about food sharing, how it works, and I think it's an interesting thing, and we definitely need to have a call sharing our practices, and we need to talk to our colleagues about ethno-volunteering, because our listeners are asking their questions and everyone's interested. So I want to thank you, because we are running out of time. So I want to thank you so much, and I want to invite you to the offline part. And in Bashkortostan, we had the offline part of the volunteering camp in October. Well, if nothing changes, it'll be 18th through 24th of October. And there we'll be talking about cultural life, volunteering in cultural projects, ethno-volunteering, and we'll try to restore the historical site, and we'll learn how to work with wood, how to work with stones, and we'll be very happy to see you there if it's possible offline. If not, then online. And I'm sure that it'll be interesting both for you and for us. Thank you very much. Really interesting subject. And when we're talking about fundraising and scaling projects, we've touched upon. So the next subject is flagship project and creating a community around social cultural franchise. And we have an invited expert from Tunisia who'll be talking about their practices. It's something that's concerns everyone. Do we have to create any millions of projects, or we should scale the existing projects? So stay with us and we'll carry on in around 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Я получил образование в библиотеке совершенно бесплатно, отмечал знаменитый писатель Рэй Брэдбери. Современные учреждения культуры, библиотеки, музеи, театры – не просто места, где можно прикоснуться к прекрасному. Они помогают в саморазвитии и образовании. И для создания новых форматов и событий им нередко бывает нужна наша с вами помощь.
Волонтеры нужны для того, чтобы делать то, что мы не можем делать без них. В частности, нам волонтеры помогают быть больше, чем музей.
Для многих волонтерство открывает новые возможности. Человек думает, а что такое библиотека? А что такое музей? Это пыльные книги, это пыльные экспонаты. Но когда приходит сюда в качестве волонтера, он видит совсем другую картину. Он понимает, что именно здесь можно реализовать свои интересы.
Программа «Волонтеры культуры» создает и развивает добровольческое движение в самых разных уголках страны, как в столице, так и в регионах, как в больших городах, так и в сельских поселениях. Мы оказываем всестороннюю поддержку волонтерскому сообществу. С нашей помощью добровольцы могут реализовать свой потенциал и получить новые компетенции.
Библиотеки, как и любая культурная институция, сегодня, конечно, не могут жить и обходиться без участия жизни волонтеров и их вклада. И наша библиотека номер 119, библиотека времени, не исключение. Я вообще считаю, что волонтеры — это в первую очередь друзья, люди вовлеченные, которые разделяют ценности библиотеки.
Библиодобровольцы — это люди, которые помогают библиотекам практически во всех вопросах, которые возникают. Без них невозможно представить деятельность библиотек.
Присоединяйтесь к программе «Волонтеры культуры». Вы сможете не только помогать любимому музею или библиотеке, но и всесторонне развиваться. Новое знание и практический опыт помогают добровольцам в достижении поставленных целей. Главное – менять к лучшему жизнь вокруг. Помощь добровольцев нужна учреждениям культуры в любом городе. Ждем вас!
В значит волонтеры.
Почти в каждом городе есть старинные здания, которые определяют его лицо. Делают город отличающимся, необычным. Во многих таких зданиях сегодня располагаются музеи. Сюда приходят туристы, здесь происходят культурные мероприятия. Но многие объекты культурного наследия нуждаются в реставрации, ремонте, поддержке. Хотели бы что-то сделать для этих зданий, помочь в их восстановлении? Присоединяйтесь к программе «Волонтеры культуры». Программа поддерживает добровольческое движение, помогает беречь культурное наследие и исторический облик наших городов. Став участником, вы научитесь новому, поставите перед собой интересные, необычные цели, сможете реализовать собственные идеи и проекты, собрать свою команду для того, чтобы реальными делами помогать сохранению истории и развитию культуры.
Я думаю, что волонтерское движение – это вообще очень важный факт нашей жизни, вот современной. Волонтеры очень нужны, и мы все очень нуждаемся в них.
Принять участие в программе «Волонтеры культуры» может каждый. Помогайте сохранять свои города и их культурное наследие. Возраст не важен. Получить нужные умения и внести свой вклад могут все. Участвуйте в программе «Волонтеры культуры».
Я уже записался. Увидимся.
Я получил образование в библиотеке совершенно бесплатно, отмечал знаменитый писатель Рэй Брэдбери. Современные учреждения культуры, библиотеки, музеи, театры – не просто места, где можно прикоснуться к прекрасному. Они помогают в саморазвитии и образовании. И для создания новых форматов и событий им нередко бывает нужна наша с вами помощь.
Волонтеры нужны для того, чтобы делать то, что мы не можем делать без них. В частности, нам волонтеры помогают быть больше, чем музей.
Для многих волонтерство открывает новые возможности. Человек думает, а что такое библиотека? А что такое музей? Это пыльные книги, это пыльные экспонаты. Но когда приходит сюда в качестве волонтера, он видит совсем другую картину. Он понимает, что именно здесь можно реализовать свои интересы.
Программа «Волонтеры культуры» создает и развивает добровольческое движение в самых разных уголках страны, как в столице, так и в регионах, как в больших городах, так и в сельских поселениях. Мы оказываем всестороннюю поддержку волонтерскому сообществу. С нашей помощью добровольцы могут реализовать свой потенциал и получить новые компетенции.
Библиотеки, как и любая культурная институция, сегодня, конечно, не могут жить и обходиться без участия в жизни волонтеров и их вклада. И наша библиотека номер 119, библиотека времени, не исключение. Я вообще считаю, что волонтеры — это в первую очередь друзья, люди вовлеченные, которые разделяют ценности библиотеки.
Библиодобровольцы — это люди, которые помогают библиотекам практически во всех вопросах, которые возникают. Без них невозможно представить деятельность библиотек.
Присоединяйтесь к программе «Волонтеры культуры». Вы сможете не только помогать любимому музею или библиотеке, но и всесторонне развиваться. Новые знания и практический опыт помогают добровольцам в достижении поставленных целей. Главное – менять к лучшему жизнь вокруг. Помощь добровольцев нужна учреждениям культуры в любом городе. Ждем вас!
В значит волонтеры.
Почти в каждом городе есть старинные здания, которые определяют его лицо. Делают город отличающимся, необычным. Во многих таких зданиях сегодня располагаются музеи. Сюда приходят туристы, здесь происходят культурные мероприятия. Но многие объекты культурного наследия нуждаются в реставрации, ремонте, поддержке. Хотели бы что-то сделать для этих зданий, помочь в их восстановлении? Присоединяйтесь к программе «Волонтеры культуры». Программа поддерживает добровольческое движение, помогает беречь культурное наследие и исторический облик наших городов. Став участником, вы научитесь новому, поставите перед собой интересные, необычные цели, сможете реализовать собственные идеи и проекты, собрать свою команду для того, чтобы реальными делами помогать сохранению истории и развитию культуры.
Я думаю, что волонтерское движение – это вообще очень важный факт нашей жизни, вот современной. Волонтеры очень нужны, и мы все очень нуждаемся в них.
Принять участие в программе «Волонтеры культуры» может каждый. Помогайте сохранять свои города и их культурное наследие. Возраст не важен. Получить нужные умения и внести свой вклад могут все. Участвуйте в программе «Волонтеры культуры».
Я уже записался. Увидимся.
Я получил образование в библиотеке совершенно бесплатно, отмечал знаменитый писатель Рэй Брэдбери. Современные учреждения культуры, библиотеки, музеи, театры – не просто места, где можно прикоснуться к прекрасному. Они помогают в саморазвитии и образовании. И для создания новых форматов и событий им нередко бывает нужна наша с вами помощь.
Волонтеры нужны для того, чтобы делать то, что мы не можем делать без них. В частности, нам волонтеры помогают быть больше, чем музей.
Для многих волонтерство открывает новые возможности. Человек думает, а что такое библиотека? А что такое музей? Это пыльные книги, это пыльные экспонаты. Но когда приходит сюда в качестве волонтера, он видит совсем другую картину. Он понимает, что именно здесь можно реализовать свои интересы.
Программа «Волонтеры культуры» создает и развивает добровольческое движение в самых разных уголках страны, как в столице, так и в регионах, как в больших городах, так и в сельских поселениях. Мы оказываем всестороннюю поддержку волонтерскому сообществу. С нашей помощью добровольцы могут реализовать свой потенциал и получить новые компетенции.
Библиотеки, как и любая культурная институция, сегодня, конечно, не могут жить и обходиться без участия в жизни волонтеров и их вклада. И наша библиотека номер 119, библиотека времени, не исключение. Я вообще считаю, что волонтеры — это в первую очередь друзья, люди вовлеченные, которые разделяют ценности библиотеки.
Библиодобровольцы — это люди, которые помогают библиотекам практически во всех вопросах, которые возникают. Без них невозможно представить деятельность библиотек.
Присоединяйтесь к программе «Волонтеры культуры». Вы сможете не только помогать любимому музею или библиотеке, но и всесторонне развиваться. Новые знания и практический опыт помогают добровольцам в достижении поставленных целей. Главное – менять к лучшему жизнь вокруг. Помощь добровольцев нужна учреждениям культуры в любом городе. Ждем вас!
В значит волонтеры.
Почти. Я получил образование в библиотеке.
Всем привет, еще раз доброе утро.
Hello, everyone. Again, we continue the International Volunteer Camp. Today, we will continue the practical workshop to discuss tools to create community around the social and cultural franchise. We will have both Russian and international experts to speak about the experience in those projects, how they were able to scale those projects in Russia and outside. Usan Uzabda, he is from the International Council of Young People in Tunisia. Let me introduce him. He is an expert from Tunisia, and last year he took part in the International Cultural Volunteer Camp, and he will speak about his experience today. I'm sure we'll probably create some new project together. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for giving me this opportunity again to participate in the International Volunteer Camp. So I would like to thank all the organizers and all the Russian authorities for organizing such international events that make the bilateral exchange and the bilateral opportunities larger and wider. So thank you so much. I would like also to thank all the organizers and especially the Russian Federal Executive Authority of Youth Affairs, or in Russian Rosmoldosh. I guess I'm not good in Russian, but I'm trying to learn some words, so I hope that I pronounce it in the right way. So my name is Usama Zebda. I'm the president and founder of the International Youth Council France Association, which is a global organization based in Tunisia, which promote the sustainable development goals and the human rights in Tunisia and worldwide. During the last few years, we've been working in the area of cultural exchange and cultural event, and we have organized several international events, starting from the International Youth Summer Tour, which is a platform that promotes the project, SDGs project, while discovering the beauty of Tunisia and discovering also the heritage and culture traditions of the participants. So during these years, we have been working with international organizations, with international also institutions to create some kind of partnerships, because we believe that making partnerships is the key word and the key of success of any international cultural event. So from the beginning of the creation and foundation of my organization, we have been pioneer in making this collaboration, especially with the Russians, NGOs, with the Russian institution, and even with the Russian institution, Rosmoldosh. So it was like a great opportunity for us to participate in many different events, in many different projects, so we can promote both the Russian events and also the Tunisian events and conferences. So we have succeeded in making exchange programs that we have, for example, during the last 2 years, we have invited more than 20 Russians here in Tunisia, and it was a great opportunity for them to discover the Tunisian culture, discover the Tunisian traditions, and also to discover the history between Tunisia and Russia. For example, during the civil war of Russia, they have escaped to Tunisia and they have found the Tunisian locals and people, accepting them, welcoming them in their houses and their homes, and giving them like the lands and giving them the opportunities to live there. So we have now in Tunisia museums to celebrate this friendship between Russia and Tunisia, and between the two countries. Also, during the few years, we have been sending a lot of Tunisian participants and Tunisian delegates to discover Russia and stay away from the stereotypes that are promoted in the media. So doing this bilateral exchange and doing this cultural events, it's a great opportunity for the civic society and especially the international civic society to promote the peace in our world, especially to prevent also from terrorism, from violence, from unacceptance, and from hate speeches. So we as international civic society and international civic activists are responsible for promoting a world that celebrate peace, celebrate culture, celebrate traditions, and respect other civilization. So as organization, we want actually to create a lot of events, to create a lot of conferences, to create a lot of projects, and we have started in that since the foundation of our organization. As I said, we have founded the International Summer Tour, which happens every year, and we invite internationals from all over the world to come to Tunisia and discover our traditions, our culture, our food, and even to share their own culture and traditions and so on. And during the past 3 years, for example, we have invited more than 120 participants from more than 60 countries, which is a lot. Also, we have organized a lot of bilateral projects with the Russian authorities and the Russian institutions and NGOs, like the Make Her Smile, which is an event that celebrates the International Women's Day. So we go and give awards and greet the women during this International Women's Day to have to promote this culture of celebration in all over the world, not only in Russia, not only in Tunisia, but in all the different countries of the globe. Also, we have been taking part in so many different cultural and exchange programs. For example, the International Volunteer Camp, the International Volunteer Forum, and also we have been implicated even in international competition organized by the Russian NGOs. For example, the prize We Are Together International Award, We Are Together, which is organized by Russian organization to select these volunteers and these participants who gave and who has organized so many projects to prevent their community and to help the health system in their country during the pandemic. I know we have faced, especially during the COVID-19, so many obstacles, so many difficulties in organizing our planet events and creating, how can I say, these online programs and these virtual conferences is great.
Да, картинка застыла, и я не слышу выступающего, к сожалению, не могу его переводить. Не знаю, это только
У нас небольшая техническая неполадка, видимо, у нас немножечко...
Yes, we have a technical issue. Maybe the internet connection was poor. Hopefully, Osama will be able to restore internet connection and will come back to us. Yeah. Yes, indeed. We have developed international practices together. Yes, this international award, We Are Together, which evaluates applications. I think Osama is back and he can continue, please.
Sorry for this interruption. I don't know where I have stopped. Sorry for this interruption because of the internet, but I hope that you hear me right now. Perfect. So, as I said before, during pandemic, all the international organization, all the institutions, and all the NGOs has faced a lot of problem in organizing their planned exchange programs, their planned cultural conferences, and their planned projects. But having this virtual tools and technologies made it possible for us to organize such virtual and online conferences and camps, which we really appreciated, and which we really appreciate the fact that, for example, the International Volunteer Camp is organized and still organized for the second edition, which is very interesting and which very proof that even these difficulties in traveling and organizing to respect the sanitarian protocols and COVID-19 protocols, we can, as international civic society, do our job and promote this cultural exchange and promote peace and promote all the humanitarian values in all over the world. So I really appreciate the fact of participating in this international volunteer camp. Also, I really want and hope that in the future we see such conferences and such camps are promoted in all over the world, not only international volunteer camp, but we hope to see this kind of forums and this kind of camps all over the world. So this is what I think actually concerning the cultural exchange and the importance of organizing and participating in the international civic society and the international conferences that are related with culture. Because as I said, we have threats in our world, especially from what we hear from hate speeches, from the political also issues and conflicts. We hear every day some wars. We hear every day misunderstanding and stereotypes in the media. We can't, even the user or the internet it's not possible for them to identify false news from the good news. So we as international civic society are the key of promoting this culture and this culture of peace and our humanitarian values to prevent this world and our countries and even all the international community from hate speeches and from these potential threats. So I don't know if you have any questions, or I don't know even if I should what kind of limits of time. So that's it. I don't know if you have any questions, or should I continue?
Да, у наших коллег, зрителей.
Yes, our attendees, our visitors of the International Volunteer Camp do have quite a few questions. Please tell us about some volunteer project or any project where volunteers are engaged, which is part of your cultural life of your country. Have you got such examples of such projects?
Yes, definitely. During the pandemic, for example, we have been working in a project related, which is named Lamet Ramadan. Lamet Ramadan is an opportunity to share kindness and to show kindness to all the students who are stuck in their dormitories and in their campus during lockdown and during the pandemic, because of the pandemic of COVID-19. So in our organization, we have organized Lamet Ramadan, which is an event that make sure that the quality of dishes served in the public restaurants in campus during the fasting month of Ramadan, which is a holy month that where Muslims and peoples in Tunisia fast from the morning to the evening. So we had a lot of difficulties during the lockdown because the restaurant weren't able to work because of the restrictions, and the students find themselves unable to have the minimum food. So we as organization have organized this event to get sponsors, to get partners, and bring food to them with a great quality. So volunteers from both Tunisian and international have participated in this event to promote and to make sure that to show kindness, to create a good atmosphere for them during Ramadan. Even we have some volunteers who aren't Muslims, but at the same time participated in this event to serve the Muslims, which shows how peaceful we are in our organization and in our country, and how we respect human values and how we respect international how can I say difference. So these events can help us show kindness, show the real world about the behavior of some religious people, some religions, which could help to prevent threats and misunderstanding from the stereotypes that are promoted from the TVs and the social media. Also, we have organized several events. For example, the one which is related of cafe debate, which is an opportunity to create discussion panels and discussion circles between youth, so they can exchange idea, exchange projects, and debating in some issues, so we can raffinate and decrease the amount of conflicts or the amount of issues between thoughts, and promote them and teach them how they can convince people without threatening them in a peaceful way. So it was a great opportunity for volunteers to debate, to enhance their skills regarding debating. And there is so many other projects that I really couldn't mention all of them, because we have like dozens and hundreds of projects that were implemented in our organization in the past 4 years.
Спасибо вам большое.
Thank you very much. And our colleagues are also asking, do you have any projects in the sphere of tourism?
Yes, definitely. Actually, in the tourism, we have the international summer tour, which, as I said last time, is a great opportunity for all international students to discover Tunisia, the beauty of Tunisia. As you know, Tunisia has a history of 3,000 years. We're the country that elaborated the first constitution in the world via the Carthaginian culture. Also, we're the country that that has the first university in the world, which is the Mosque of Zitouna, which is a lot of people that don't know these informations. We have the largest Coliseum in the world outside Roma, and we have the largest amount of mosaics, heritage, Roman heritage that exists in the museum in Tunisia, and so many other things and facts that are found here in Tunisia. So we, as International Youth Council France Association, we're trying to promote this heritage, and we're trying to promote the sightseeing in Tunisia. Each year we select a region, a different region in Tunisia. For example, in the first edition we have selected the southeast eastern part in Tunisia, where 60 participants from all over the world, from 20 countries, have came to Tunisia and discovered so many different cities in 10 days. It was a great opportunity for them to discover so many cities, for example, Jerba Island, Tatooine, Kairouan, Mahdia, and even the capital. For the second edition, we have selected a different region, which is the northeast east of Tunisia, where participants have visited more than 6 cities from all the eastern side of northern Tunisia. It was a great opportunity for them to show them each time different region in Tunisia, different program, different food, different traditions, because here in Tunisia, it's true we have small country, very small country comparing with Russia, but the fun fact that in each city you will find different tonation with different words, like different food and different traditional clothes, which is a proof that in Tunisia we have a very rich history and a very rich culture. So we, as International Youth Council France Association, we try to promote this culture. We try to show the world about the importance of our heritage, about the importance of our traditions and clothes and food, and also give the opportunities to foreigners and international participants to share their own culture during this event. This event is an annually event. Each year we organize it. Unfortunately, during COVID, we have decided to delay it to 2022. So we're planning to come back and organize the third edition of the International Summer Tour in Tunisia in 2022, because, as you know, in Tunisia we had a very severe situation where the health system in Tunisia faced a lot of problems, and a lot of our friend countries helped us to succeed and to pass this critical period by sending a lot of donations and sending aid. Thank goodness now we have the more stable situation, and we hope in the future that it will be better. So that's why we have planned the next International Summer Tour to be in 2022. By the way, you can check all the updates about our events in our website, iycf.space. So iycf.space, or on Instagram, iycf.association. So you will find all the informations, all the details about all the events and our planned projects.
Спасибо вам большое. Действительно, теперь у нас...
Thank you very much. Indeed. Wow. Thanks again. I would like to thank you, and I want to give floor to our colleague, Vyacheslav Cherikov, who will be the next speaker. This is the person who got into the finals of Volunteer of Russia in 2020, and the author of project Reviving the Traditions and Helping Children. And I'm sure that Vyacheslav will be better at talking about his projects, and he'll tell us. Hello, dear participants of the International Volunteer Camp. I'm very happy to welcome all of you here, and I want to tell you about my project. So, we started from the childhood. My parents got me to love the culture and arts, and I was learning different skills, and but I was most interested in weaving. And to learn more about weaving, I was traveling all over Russia to get the knowledge from those who have these traditions. I was traveling, learning from our grandmas. I was learning a lot from them. And unfortunately, books and video classes won't give the complete idea about the material and immaterial heritage. And you've got to learn from our grandmothers to avoid losing the transfer of this. The idea of helping children appeared in 2017 when I was visiting one of the festivals, and there I visited the lecture of Nick Vujicic, internationally recognized speaker, and he inspired me. And I asked myself the question, how can I help? And it was then when I got the idea of creating the project, reviving traditions and helping children, that is aimed at weaving classes for the children with limited physical capabilities and for the orphans. So the project aims at their social adaptation and improving their health. And of course, the project is also aimed at preserving the cultural heritage of our ancestors. And taking part in the competition, Volunteer of Russia helped developing the project, and professional weaving equipment was bought that expanded the technical opportunities that we have, and with the help of which children learned new weaving techniques. The project is being scaled actively, and this year I was running master classes in Tavrida art space. And in June we had Move Misty, or We Are Together masterclass, and brought together young artists from all over Russia and children with limited capabilities, and everyone brought old t-shirts and we cut them into stripes, and we have created a joint work, the friendship rag, and it was really cycling when something old gets a new life. And I am doing master classes not only in my region but in different regions of Russia, and I'm telling about different skills and different trades, and young people are really interested in that, and I have a lot of students. As for the further plans, well, carry on with the project and opening some constant studio, and I have decided to create such a studio in Lipetsk and also opening branches in other regions of Russia. And to conclude, I'd like to share with you the motto that I use in life. Do only something what gets you closer to your dreams. So dream and implement the dreams in reality. And I'll be happy to answer your questions. Vyacheslav, it's really, really interesting. And indeed, we want to learn more about your project in terms of its mechanic. Can any person learn this? Can you scale your project? As for the skill or the trade, any person can learn that, and I teach small children and adults. You come from simple to complex. In the beginning, we learn simple weaving techniques, then we move on to more complex weaving, using some complex weaver loom, something that you can see behind my back, standing there by the wall. And volunteers help a lot. They explain children the techniques and so on. And you have to learn from someone. And in the children camp where I worked, orphans came and limited capabilities children came from all over Lipetsk region. And I had many students learning from me for 4 years in a row. And they became volunteers helping me organizing the work that I do. And I plan to scale this project in other regions, visiting other regions, training volunteers in techniques and manual weaving that they'll be able to pass on to others. Vyacheslav, tell me, what kind of equipment you need to create your project? Is it expensive? Because, yeah, you need to learn the techniques, the skill, and are we ready to learn and teach? And we need funding for that, even if it's not much. So how much money do you need to launch your project, and is it possible to do it without the money? Well, I started everything without any kind of funding, and all the necessary tools, well, I created them myself. And for instance, you can avoid using tools in weaving. You need threads and you need the desire to create something beautiful. But to utilize a more professional approach to weaving, yeah, you need weaver looms. And there is this problem that in Russia, weaving equipment is not being manufactured at the industrial scale. And my equipment, well, I had to buy from abroad. For instance, these looms I was buying from New Zealand, and that's why the price was quite high. But you can buy equipment from the craftsmanship. But unfortunately, many craftsmanship don't have the individual entrepreneur status, and you can get difficulties in tax reporting. But to start with, you can buy something simple like Bionta, and actually, I can even train how to create your equipment yourself. And in my YouTube channel, we have a lot of videos on that. And you can buy something very simple, some simple weaver loom, in which you can weave scarves and large and small scarves, and you can use it and you can wear those clothes. So I think that this kind of sphere will be developing, and it'll be drawing more and more interest amongst people. Thank you very much. Maybe we'll have more questions from the audience. And now I want to give floor to Sergei Gashkalov, the head of the flagship program from Volunteer Centers Association Cultural Quest. And I hope that Sergei will tell us about his project and about scaling, because it's one of the most scalable projects in our world. Thank you. Hi, my name is Sergei, and I present Cultural Quest project that is being run in 18 regions of our country. It appeared in St. Petersburg, and I'm in St. Petersburg now. And the project appeared in the form of a student initiative, bringing together volunteer centers, cultural sites to bring new people for them to join the volunteering projects. As for the quest itself, what we work on mainly, we work on creating volunteer centers on the basis of some cultural organizations. And the second task is to create new, unique routes within the cities, within the regions, and amongst volunteering centers and in cultural institutions too. And we are trying some new unique formats that are not highly used in our country. something they have more experience with in the West. And we try to get young volunteer community involved to give our tours a better quality. The project is developing quite actively, and this month we ran this project in Khanty-Mansi region and in Vladimir, and soon it'll start in Khakassia, where the volunteering communities create some kind of platform for implementing some youth initiatives, bringing together the participants who are interested in cultural heritage of their cities, and they create some unique formats, therefore improving the quality of such tours, involving more and more people to cultural volunteering. And I would like to say that the project would be scaled in and rolled out in other regions too. We have the social franchise that we created together with association.
And I think that this project will help promote volunteers of culture to extended scales and give extra momentum to all cultural initiatives. And I think this cooperation will help develop new social and cultural initiatives and engage international community to projects in this country, in Russia. And on the basis of this international cooperation, we'll be able to create new interesting initiatives and will help us scale our projects in Russia.
Большой вопрос от наших зрителей.
A small question from our attendees. Could you please give us an example of how your project was scaled in some other region last year or maybe this year? How was it implemented from beginning to end? All right. Our project is related to volunteer community. Each volunteer wants to spend time with a cultural institution, and on the basis of this cultural institution, maybe add some new tours, excursions, or quests. And I will tell you about the quest. Well, first of all, I should mention that volunteers are interested in participating in this project. So when they come to the museum management, as they work with the archives of museums, they create unique tours that basically stay with this museum or cultural institution. So how to join our franchise? I'll explain. We have a guideline that we put together with the help of other regions. These guidelines help our partners create a similar project in their respective region. So they make a request, they make an application, file an application on our website, or they can address me directly or head of our projects in St. Petersburg. This will be the first step. So the first step is to look for a partner, an entity, a cultural institution that could help implement this project in a given region. And then there is a synthesis of ideas takes place and cooperation with cultural institutions on whose basis quests are created. And further down the road, a big event is held that engages many people. So last time we had a quest in Vladimir region, in the city of Vladimir, and the quest was part of the all-Russian forum of volunteers of culture called Nevsky 800. This quest included about 300 people, 300 participants, and over 10 cultural institutions, which provided participants with interesting formats or supported different formats of quests with the use of exhibits in those museums or cultural institutions. Yes, I'm talking more about museums here, but at the same time, many regions want to have quests not only in museums, but in other cultural institutions such as theaters or art galleries. And they want to engage communities of people who are interested in culture, and they help to engage people in their environment. In St. Petersburg region, for example, there was a unique format of a quest. It was car quest in St. Petersburg region, and they drove 15 kilometers to show interesting sites of St. Petersburg region and to raise awareness for the cultural heritage for the participants of this quest. A question from the visitors: what is your favorite route that was developed? Quest route. I know you developed routes of Yekaterin II. Do you have your favorite one that you want to walk several times on and on? Yes, I have one like this. This is a quest created at the very beginning in St. Petersburg when we didn't even have strong support from the regional authorities, from the federal grant operators. So we did it on our own initiatives and our own expense, so to speak. So this was the quest, the route organized with the Russian Pushkin Museum, Kazansky Temple, and the Hermitage Museum, and Derzhavin's Museum House. And this route was organized to show the participants, to familiarize the participants with the life and work of Pushkin, a famous poet, and his connection with the Mason community. Well, we know that Pushkin was at some point considered an individual whose spirit was also present in Alexander Dumas' body or mind. And Alexander Dumas is a famous French writer. So this quest is still in place in St. Petersburg on the basis of the All-Russian Museum of Pushkin. So if you come to St. Petersburg and if you come to our region, you'll be able to walk this quest and understand or learn more about the life and work of Alexander Pushkin and learn about his ring with a gem and what was happening during the duel between Pushkin and Dantes. Pushkin had big debts. Yes, he had big debts, and some people say that he staged his death at a duel to be able to further live and work in France under the nickname of Alexander Dumas. This is even proven by some sources. even some official sources. Well, to be honest, I learned about this theory several years ago. I want the attendees to vote who believe that Pushkin or Alexander Dumas is the new incarnation of Alexander Pushkin. Well, some historians support this theory, some not. I would also like to visit such cultural quest, because this includes both history, myths, legends, and it's a consolidation of various cultural institutions. I visited St. Petersburg several times, and this is what I actually missed. I wanted to learn more about Alexander Pushkin when I was in St. Petersburg. Let me summarize about the social and cultural franchise. Sergei's project is the most scalable at this point. I think he was scaled in 7 or even 9 regions. Sergei, correct me if I'm wrong. Yes, in 7 regions, we scaled it as part of the Culture Foundation grant. And also, the project is implemented with the help of the regional budget in at least 6 more regions. In Dagestan, Yaroslavl region, and the projects are supported by volunteer centers in association with local authorities who provide financial support. Well, franchising was taken from the business environment. Well, I hope many of you understand what a franchise is. If not, let me briefly explain what a franchise is. A franchise is a unified story, is a versatile story that can be taken and scaled regardless of your skills. So it's a package of documents, it's a package of tools wrapped into a single mechanism. For example, in social and cultural franchise, we have a franchise of this project, which includes the passport of the project, all mass media tools, and all necessary documentation. And you can also contact the flagship project representatives or flagship project leader to explain how to implement this franchise. So franchise is taken from the business environment and implemented in culture. It is absolutely great that we were able to adapt it, and now the social franchise is propagating, such as Dobre Center, for example. It was presented several times ago. It's a social franchise where we create our own Dobre Centre, kind centers. And the flagship franchise teaches other franchises how to do this, to do harm and not to to do good but not to do harm. So to make sure those who need get the good and those who do not need don't get the harm. So there are people who have a lot of initiatives in his mind but doesn't know how to implement them. In this case, it might be interesting to take a franchise, implement it, exercise different skills, and then see what can be done on his or her own. And now I would like to hand over to Alfina Grishenko, head of the flagship project of the Laboratory of Success. This project is related to people with special conditions, health conditions. So Alfina is now at one of the sites. She's coaching people. So Alfina, the floor is yours. Yes. Hello, everyone. Yeah. Can you hear me well? Because there is a training going on just at the backstage, in the background. Let me say a few words about the project. The Laboratory of Success has been in place since 2017. Our goal is to perform therapeutical art master classes for people who need it. We have scaled into 4 regions: Volgograd, Tambov, Adygea Republic, and Mariel Republic. In each region, we have specific target audience. Originally, we had people or children from rehabilitation centers who abused drugs. In the other region, we work with people who had a stroke. But we have a single goal across all regions. If the program is for kids, we want to develop their improve their emotional status, teach kids how to control their emotions. While for people with a stroke, who had a stroke, we try to help them work better with their hands. I would love to show you how our master classes are conducted. For example, we teach drawing. Alcohol-based ink is used. Let me show you how we do this. So these girls are now painting using this technique. Look how beautiful it is. With this technique, you can express your emotions and feelings. Look how different the pictures are. Each participant has his or her own painting. And after this master class, those who participated are able to teach others, or just to use it in your daily life. Relax, express yourself, make it a hobby. So in the future, the girls will be able to use it. Maybe they will become teachers or artists. So this will come in handy at some point, we're sure. Maybe it will develop into some interesting project. So as I said, those participants will be able to give coaching or master classes in for kids with some disabilities, or adults or elderly people with disabilities. Do you have any questions? Yes, we do have questions, and our attendees do as well. You are the first expert who was able to speak to us from the place of where the project is being conducted. So here is what is done. Alfina teaches volunteers, and then volunteers go to the regions and teach people who need it. As I understand, you have eight sites of implementation. In how many places your projects have been implemented? And Alfina is from the Republic of Bashkortostan, where we're going to have the offline of our international volunteer camp. I'm sure Alfina will be able to share the tools and techniques at one of the master classes as part of the international volunteer camp. And maybe our volunteers will subsequently be able to give trainings to people with disabilities, for example. I think it will be important both for Alfina, for ourselves, and for the volunteers. A short question. Which techniques are recommended for kids with emotional issues? Do you have any specific tools and techniques? All techniques that we promote in our project are abstract ways of drawing. This has nothing to do with academic drawing or painting. But those abstract techniques, this is eyebrow drawing, drawing on the water, there are no strict rules. So people can improvise, use their fantasies, and you never know what will come out of it. And you never know how a drop of water with paint will look on the water or on a piece of paper. So even people who have been using this technique for 20 years know how unpredictable the outcome is, and which is a great thing about it. So for kids with disabilities, it is also a good technique for them to be able to relax and to get some good outcome. My approach is that we can cure ourselves. people can cure ourselves, and art can help you cure from a lot of diseases and conditions. And art can help people in a difficult life situation, for example. And I see how helpful it may become for people who are in trouble, who have emotional issues or some disabilities. Art can help you relax, set your mind on some good things, achieve peace of mind as you draw. One more question from our attendees. I think attendees of Tavrida, the All-Russian Festival of Art. Tavrida art that took place in Crimea in September. So Albina gave a master class to blind tourists. Well, it was fluid art technique, and she was doing that together with one blind participant. So it was suggested for other people to close their eyes and draw with their eyes closed. You worked with this group, you worked with that person. Could you please share your thoughts and feelings? Yes, indeed. We had about 12 to 15 people, the first group with which we experimented and had this unusual experience. So the people could see the paints, but they couldn't see what they were drawing. That was the idea. So after the master class, when we talked with the participants about what they were doing, well, first of all, I should say that all the drawings were great, beautiful, and unusual. And I said, what is your impression? Would you like to try this technique with your eyes open, or would you prefer to have your eyes closed?
And one guy, I think he was a sportsman, said, I like it the way it is. I won't change anything. And from this, you get some slight pleasant anxiety from the fact that you don't know what you'll get in the end. And he said that when he comes home, he would use this kind of painting as a basis for the clock. And it's great. You can use it for anything. You can make a tabletop out of it and whatever. And I think it's really useful because that gives people the consciousness. It's not just art therapy. It's just for the people to realize that there are a lot of us in the world and people are so different, to promote better tolerance and better attitude to people who are blind. And frankly, I would like to have this kind of masterclass again. I can't just even find words to explain my emotional state from that. Thank you. And could you give us some real cases, the outcomes of your activities? Are there any improvements in terms of motor skills? And I know that they get there, but just what do the beneficiaries get? In the region where we are working with the children in the rehab centers, and we keep in touch with them. And indeed, for instance, there is this girl, and I remembered her because when I was leaving the rehabilitation center, well, we always come with the presents, and together with masterclass, we give some extra presents. And this girl, she was asking a lot about arts. She was asking such questions that an adult won't think of. And she was asking really interesting questions, and we've been working with her for about a month. And they had graduation. So every 45 days, they have the so-called graduation in the rehabilitation center. And after the rehabilitation center, she got accepted in the university in arts. And when I was saying goodbye to her, she wasn't planning that yet, and I gave her a present, nice professional paint. And when I was giving them to her, I said that I hope that you have some art in your life, and it will be important for you. And I hope that I somehow managed to share my love of art with you. Sorry, there was some issues. And so she got her present of paint, and it's really touching when we say goodbye, and we don't see many of them afterwards. But she managed to get accepted in the university with a major in arts, and I think it's really nice when a person after rehabilitation center carries on with their life and carries on studying. From what I know, her major is arts and teaching. And the question, I think it's the final question from our viewers. What do you think? Do you need to create the new initiatives or scale old ones? And I think this is a question to all of our experts on flagship projects. So, but please start. What do you think? What's better? Well, when volunteers come to my project, I can say that my project is like my child. It's something you give birth to, that you grow. It's something that you create. And when volunteers come to project that it's already there, they help scale it and so on. But I always tell them, create something of your own, because when a person creates something of their own, the person can use their interesting idea. And I think at some point of time you lose, you don't see all the possibilities that are there. And the young volunteers, they have their new ideas. And I think that it's best to create something new, helping scale up the old projects. Slava, Vyacheslav, what do you think? Yeah, and I want to say that everything new is the old that was forgotten. And it's important to not forget about traditions and the experience of our ancestors, passing it on to next generations. Of course, adapting to modern reality, and you get an interesting product as a result. Because even fashion is changing all the time, and in the end, we get back to somewhere we were. So everything is in a cycle in our lives, and the most important thing is not to forget our traditions, our history, trying to make all that very popular amongst young people. And the previous expert, Tinka, I think she would have supported you very much. She was talking about ethno-volunteering, and if you get acquainted with her, I'm sure that you'll get an international collaboration, and your project may be scaled up in Kazakhstan, and I'm sure that Tinkai will help that a lot, and you definitely need to meet her. Yeah, I would be very happy to. Osama, what do you think? Is it best to scale up the old projects or create new initiatives?
Actually, both of axes are very important. Scaling current projects will make it better impact and impacting more different wide of range of people from different countries. And even creating a new project is very important for the international community, for the volunteers all around the world. So the both of axes are very important for volunteers all around the world. So it was a great actually opportunity to listen to all of these projects and all of this experience. So thank you so much, guys, and keep it up.
Спасибо большое. Сережа, не
Thank you very
знаю.
much. Sergey, I don't know whether you're connected, because you might have left for a different conference. So if you're here, so please start speaking, and if not, then I would like to just thank our experts. It's indeed very important to preserve what we've already done and scale it up. And I agree with our projects that the projects that have already been created, they can not only exist, but they can develop. For every person to be able to join it or to head it, and it's really great. And I'm sure that our projects would be scaled not at the level of one country, but at international level. That's why we are conducting such international volunteer camps, and very soon we'll start the next session on preserving cultural heritage, and Natalia Gorlova will be telling you about what kind of projects are already there, how they'll be developing in the next year. And thank you very much, dear experts. And please stay with us, and in several minutes' time, we'll continue with the new session.
Я получил образование в библиотеке совершенно бесплатно, отмечал знаменитый писатель Рэй Брэдбери. Современные учреждения культуры, библиотеки, музеи, театры – не просто места, где можно прикоснуться к прекрасному. Они помогают в саморазвитии и образовании. И для создания новых форматов и событий им нередко бывает нужна наша с вами помощь.
Волонтеры нужны для того, чтобы делать то, что мы не можем делать без них. В частности, нам волонтеры помогают быть больше, чем музей.
Для многих волонтерство открывает новые возможности. Человек думает, а что такое библиотека? А что такое музей? Это пыльные книги, это пыльные экспонаты. Но когда приходит сюда в качестве волонтера, он видит совсем другую картину. Он понимает, что именно здесь можно реализовать свои интересы.
Программа «Волонтеры культуры» создает и развивает добровольческое движение в самых разных уголках страны, как в столице, так и в регионах, как в больших городах, так и в сельских поселениях. Мы оказываем всестороннюю поддержку волонтерскому сообществу. С нашей помощью добровольцы могут реализовать свой потенциал и получить новые компетенции.
Библиотеки, как и любая культурная институция, сегодня, конечно, не могут жить и обходиться без участия жизни волонтеров и их вклада. И наша библиотека номер 119, библиотека времени, не исключение. Я вообще считаю, что волонтеры — это в первую очередь друзья, люди вовлеченные, которые разделяют ценности библиотеки.
Библиодобровольцы — это люди, которые помогают библиотекам практически во всех вопросах, которые возникают. Без них невозможно представить деятельность библиотек.
Присоединяйтесь к программе «Волонтеры культуры». Вы сможете не только помогать любимому музею или библиотеке, но и всесторонне развиваться. Новое знание и практический опыт помогают добровольцам в достижении поставленных целей. Главное – менять к лучшему жизнь вокруг. Помощь добровольцев нужна учреждениям культуры в любом городе. Ждем вас!
В значит волонтеры.
Почти в каждом городе есть старинные здания, которые определяют его лицо. Делают город отличающимся, необычным. Во многих таких зданиях сегодня располагаются музеи. Сюда приходят туристы, здесь происходят культурные мероприятия. Но многие объекты культурного наследия нуждаются в реставрации, ремонте, поддержке. Хотели бы что-то сделать для этих зданий, помочь в их восстановлении? Присоединяйтесь к программе «Волонтеры культуры». Программа поддерживает добровольческое движение, помогает беречь культурное наследие и исторический облик наших городов. Став участником, вы научитесь новому, поставите перед собой интересные, необычные цели, сможете реализовать собственные идеи и проекты, собрать свою команду для того, чтобы реальными делами помогать сохранению истории и развитию культуры.
Я думаю, что волонтерское движение – это вообще очень важный факт нашей жизни, вот современной. Волонтеры очень нужны, и мы все очень нуждаемся в них.
Принять участие в программе «Волонтеры культуры» может каждый. Помогайте сохранять свои города и их культурное наследие. Возраст не важен. Получить нужные умения и внести свой вклад могут все. Участвуйте в программе «Волонтеры культуры».
Я уже записался. Увидимся.
Я получил образование в библиотеке совершенно бесплатно, отмечал знаменитый писатель Рэй Брэдбери. Современные учреждения культуры, библиотеки, музеи, театры – не просто места, где можно прикоснуться к прекрасному. Они помогают в саморазвитии и образовании. И для создания новых форматов и событий им нередко бывает нужна наша с вами помощь.
Волонтеры нужны для того, чтобы делать то, что мы не можем делать без них. В частности, нам волонтеры помогают быть больше, чем музей.
Для многих волонтерство открывает новые возможности. Человек думает, а что такое библиотека? А что такое музей? Это пыльные книги, это пыльные экспонаты. Но когда приходит сюда в качестве волонтера, он видит совсем другую картину. Он понимает, что именно здесь можно реализовать свои интересы.
Программа «Волонтеры культуры» создает и развивает добровольческое движение в самых разных уголках страны, как в столице, так и в регионах, как в больших городах, так и в сельских поселениях. Мы оказываем всестороннюю поддержку волонтерскому сообществу. С нашей помощью добровольцы могут реализовать свой потенциал и получить новые компетенции.
Библиотеки, как и любая культурная институция, сегодня, конечно, не могут жить и обходиться без участия жизни волонтеров и их вклада. И наша библиотека номер 119, библиотека времени, не исключение. Я вообще считаю, что волонтеры – это в первую очередь друзья, люди вовлеченные, которые разделяют ценности библиотеки.
Библиодобровольцы – это люди, которые помогают библиотекам практически во всех вопросах, которые возникают. Без них невозможно представить деятельность библиотек.
Присоединяйтесь к программе «Волонтеры культуры». Вы сможете не только помогать любимому музею или библиотеке, но и всесторонне развиваться. Новые знания и практический опыт помогают добровольцам в достижении поставленных целей. Главное – менять к лучшему жизнь вокруг. Помощь добровольцев нужна учреждениям культуры в любом городе. Ждем вас!
В значит волонтеры.
Почти в каждом городе есть старинные здания, которые определяют его лицо. Делают город отличающимся, необычным. Во многих таких зданиях сегодня располагаются музеи. Сюда приходят туристы, здесь происходят культурные мероприятия. Но многие объекты культурного наследия нуждаются в реставрации, ремонте, поддержке. Хотели бы что-то сделать для этих зданий, помочь в их восстановлении? Присоединяйтесь к программе «Волонтеры культуры». Программа поддерживает добровольческое движение, помогает беречь культурное наследие и исторический облик наших городов. Став участником, вы научитесь новому, поставите перед собой интересные, необычные цели, сможете реализовать собственные идеи и проекты, собрать свою команду для того, чтобы реальными делами помогать сохранению истории и развитию культуры.
Я думаю, что волонтерское движение – это вообще очень важный факт нашей жизни, вот современной. Волонтеры очень нужны, и мы все очень нуждаемся в них.
Принять участие в программе «Волонтеры культуры» может каждый. Помогайте сохранять свои города и их культурное наследие. Возраст не важен. Получить нужные умения и внести свой вклад могут все. Участвуйте в программе «Волонтеры культуры».
Я уже записался. Увидимся.
Я получил образование в библиотеке совершенно бесплатно, отмечал знаменитый писатель Рэй Брэдбери. Современные учреждения культуры, библиотеки, музеи, театры – не просто места, где можно прикоснуться к прекрасному. Они помогают в саморазвитии и образовании. И для создания новых форматов и событий им нередко бывает нужна наша с вами помощь.
Волонтеры нужны для того, чтобы делать то, что мы не можем делать без них. В частности, нам волонтеры помогают быть больше, чем музей.
Для многих волонтерство открывает новые возможности. Человек думает, а что такое библиотека? А что такое музей? Это пыльные книги, это пыльные экспонаты. Но когда приходит сюда в качестве волонтера, он видит совсем другую картину. Он понимает, что именно здесь можно реализовать свои интересы.
Программа «Волонтеры культуры» создает и развивает добровольческое движение в самых разных уголках страны, как в столице, так и в регионах, как в больших городах, так и в сельских поселениях. Мы оказываем всестороннюю поддержку волонтерскому сообществу. С нашей помощью добровольцы могут реализовать свой потенциал и получить новые компетенции.
Библиотеки, как и любая культурная институция, сегодня, конечно, не могут жить и обходиться без участия жизни волонтеров и их вклада. И наша библиотека номер 119, библиотека времени, не исключение. Я вообще считаю, что волонтеры — это в первую очередь друзья, люди вовлеченные, которые разделяют ценности библиотеки.
Библиодобровольцы — это люди, которые помогают библиотекам практически во всех вопросах, которые возникают. Без них невозможно представить деятельность библиотек.
Присоединяйтесь к программе «Волонтеры культуры». Вы сможете не только помогать любимому музею или библиотеке, но и всесторонне развиваться. Новые знания и практический опыт помогают добровольцам в достижении поставленных целей. Главное – менять к лучшему жизнь вокруг. Помощь добровольцев нужна учреждениям культуры в любом городе. Ждем вас!
В значит волонтеры.
Друзья, мы продолжаем наш международный волонтерский лагерь. И сейчас мы с вами поговорим о практике сохранения объектов культурного наследия силами волонтерских сообществ и некоммерческих организаций. И я хочу вам представить нашего спикера, наикрутейшего.
Let me introduce our super speaker, Natalia Gorlova, PhD in Historical Sciences, professor in Plekhanov University. Natalia, the floor is yours. I know that you have the slides, so please speak loudly. Hello, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for this invitation to take part in this important event for the volunteers of culture. Indeed, in the past few years, together with the colleagues, I participate in development of methodological materials together with the All-Russian Institution for Protection of the Memorials of History. And we have the practice of engaging volunteers in the area of cultural heritage preservation, and we took part in development of a model of the international volunteer camp based in Russian museums and national parks. I would like to speak about it in greater detail, explain how NGOs build their relationships with volunteers, what managerial skills are applied, and what are the special features of interacting and dealing with volunteers. If you have questions, I'll be ready to answer. So by the end of my presentation, I'll be happy to take your questions. So back to my agenda. Let me provide you some historical information. In Europe, the main drivers of volunteer movement in protection of cultural heritage was prompted by industrial development, the end of the Second World War, establishment of the civil society, and interest of people in their own culture and history. So NGOs played a big role in development of volunteer movements, and the first restoration camps appeared in the first half of the 20th century, even after the First World War, when there was a need to restore historical monuments after the war. So in France, on the border of Germany and France, young people got together to restore villages of France and Germany after the First World War. So those young people took part in the restoration works to restore villages, and the volunteer managers provided volunteers with food and shelter. So even in the first half of the 20th century, the first attempts were made to organize volunteers. That was a good example of an international volunteer camp back in the first half of the 20th century. Well, managers are expected to provide food and shelter. This is a minimum. And back in that year, in 1920, the first volunteer organization was established. That was the International Civil Service, the primary goal of which was to restore destroyed European cities, villages, and settlements after the devastating First World War. An idea of solidarity, free of charge work became very popular among young people and people of other ages. So little by little, more and more volunteer programs were put in place, including the cultural heritage protection efforts. So therefore, international responsibility, sense of responsibility began to develop, and it was especially enhanced after the Second World War, and a lot of volunteer camps appeared after the Second World War in the 1960s, but not only those types of volunteer camps, but archaeological volunteer camps, environmental volunteer camps. They began to spread in Europe in order to consolidate Western and Eastern Europe as part of a big project. So those volunteer camps became a form of international help, assistance, and support, demonstrate a civil position, and support in restoring historical monuments as part of an international festival, for example. So that was support to a given city, country, village, or settlement. And if there were enough financial resources of a given organization, volunteers were helping at the local level. The idea of creating and hosting volunteer camps, international volunteer camps across Europe, in most countries of Europe, like the UK, Great Britain, Switzerland, France, Germany, etc. The goal was also to preserve the historic monuments, and the project preservation principle was a guiding principle according to which places of historic interest were expected to be preserved under one condition. So those monuments had to be adapted to the needs of the future generation and open for interpretation. For example, the historic buildings were expected to be operated in an active fashion by modern generations, contemporary generations. So the idea is, for example, to restore a historical monument, not for the sake of this monument, but for people to continue using them. So there have been a lot of examples when historic buildings were restored and then further used for the needs of the local population. For example, a historical building could be turned into a library, and also this building could host cafes where people could get together, read a book, exchange opinions, and enjoy the visit of this historical building. Or a historical building may become a unique pub where you could go with your friends and family, have a good time, discuss things, and enjoy yourselves. Or another examples, and a lot of NGOs who are leaders in protection of cultural heritage, they do a lot in the UK, France, and the US. And now from Russia, let us move to the UK. In the UK, there are two actively working non-commercial organizations, NGOs. One is the National Trust, called National Trust, and the second one, a powerful one, is British Heritage Organization. What do they do? So the National Trust or Fund was established in the end of the 19th century in 1895. It is now a leader in protecting and preserving cultural heritage. Its activity is regulated by British acts, British legislation adopted in the first half of the 20th century. So what does this fund do? The charter of this organization says that it was created to restore rivers and banks of England, Scotland, and Wales. Then the question, no, sorry, for in England and Wales. What about Scotland? What about Scotland with its rich historical heritage? In Scotland, they had a similar trust. It's called National Trust of Scotland, established in 1931, 40 years after, almost 40 years after the National Fund was established. On this slide, you can see the square footage, the scope of square footage, a number of historical sites for which this fund is responsible for. So 93% of the coastal area of Great Britain, 255 hectares of land, 57 villages, 160 historical gardens, 40 castles, 50 old factories and mills, 250 country houses, 45 archaeological sites, and 62 pubs and 24 lighthouses. The question is, how does this national fund take care of all this? This is the only institution in Europe which exists and operates without government funding, which is really cool. And at the core of its operation is not just salvaging of historic buildings or coastal areas. The main goal is to make the life of the current generation comfortable and pleasurable. So the idea is to preserve nature and historic buildings for the sake of all generation. So this is the goal of the National Fund. Talking about the volunteer asset of this organization. So imagine these companies, this trust has about 60,000 volunteers. It is not 600, it is 60,000 volunteers supporting this organization. So here is a screenshot with statistics, screenshot from the website of National Fund under the volunteer tab. And here are the words of appreciation from the organizers to the volunteers. And here it says that 61, even over 61 volunteers in 2017-2018 gave more than 4.6 million hours of their time to support the National Trust in more than 500 roles. This sounds really great when you understand or when you try to imagine how many volunteer hours have been contributed over this time. So everyone who wants to may become a volunteer and help. So imagine you enter the website of this company, of this organization, and then you receive the main question, why do you want to become a volunteer for this national trust? And then you're offered a multiple choice answer. Make new friends, work in wonderful places, and also contribute to something great, being preservation of the historical and cultural heritage of the UK. So if you as a volunteer answer yes, then the website says welcome, and they ask you to complete a questionnaire, and the National Trust representative will contact such a volunteer, conduct an interview to discuss all possible roles or vacancies available for you specifically. Also, as to the volunteers, National Trust doesn't have any strict requirements or criteria of choice, of selection. They say any person can become a volunteer of our organization. Your desire is a number one requirement. If you have any professional skills of an architect, restorer, SMM expert, or anyone else, and also depending on your interest and your skills and available free time, you're ready to contribute to National Trust, we'll find you a vacancy, an appropriate vacancy for you to enjoy your work as a volunteer for our National Trust. As to the portraits of volunteers, this is an interesting question. When we interact with various companies, we understand who is a average volunteer. So a consolidated portrait of a volunteer. Well, first of all, these are elderly people in most cases. So the Silver Age volunteers. We like this expression in Russia, Silver Age. Silver Age definition is applicable to Russian volunteer movement, but in the West, they don't use this terminology. So at the National Trust, they have a lot of elderly volunteers, and volunteering offers a lot of preferences. What do I mean by this? First of all, to be engaged in something after retirement, interesting leisure time, new friends, new environment, and also apply the skills available with that given volunteer. If you are a lawyer, you can help the administrative department resolve certain issues. If you're an accountant, you can also become an accountant for the National Trust on the volunteer basis to address some financial issues, create records. So depending on your skills and preferences, you'll be offered a unique role as a volunteer. As to the old volunteers, so the oldest one is 86 years, and he has been a volunteer for the National Trust of over 10 years. It is notable that when you enter the website, visit the website, you can read the stories of volunteers related to what they have done for the National Trust. So this oldest volunteer, Roy Isherwood, so together with his friend, he patrols walking paths in one of the national parks. He inspects those paths and also helps erect walls from dry rock. There is another story, Kip and Sue Wilson, a married couple, who have been helping National Trust for 23 years. Since 1996, they've been working for this National Trust, and they have huge volunteer experience in this organization. Also, not only elderly people support this trust, students are also volunteers of this National Trust. They gain skills as they work as volunteers for the National Trust, and they also get a nice line on their resume, on their CV. So by statistics, a lot of young people who were trained as volunteers in the National Trust, they actually stay with the National Trust, and sometimes they even become staff members of the National Trust. As to this volunteer program, the National Trust develops corporate volunteering and family volunteering. I will speak about that too. In this case, the trust offers families with small kids from 6 years of age take part in the programs of the National Trust. For example, on a weekend, they offer interesting work and entertainment. For example, you with your kids can work in a museum or do something else related to gardening in the summertime. So this is an alternative form of leisure, and it is very popular in the UK across British families. As to volunteer vacancies, roles performed by volunteers in this organization. So volunteers can work outdoors. They can be garden volunteers, or they can do conservation placement volunteers. They can be tour guides. They can provide information at the information center. And they also can work in administrative departments.
That this is the whole army of volunteers that consists of more than 60,000 people, and it carries out different functions, starting from charity funds collections to enlightening when they attend different schools with classes, talking about importance of preserving cultural heritage. And there are also people who are restoring, but the volunteers don't get involved in the restoration itself, because unfortunately volunteer may damage the sites and objects because they are not professionals in the spheres. But some minimum work activity, some simplest one, they can do that. And of course, they can take part in archaeological activities. And there are also opportunities for family volunteering within these organizations. It's a national trust that carries out such a program called Labor Holidays. And there are different options for this program. For instance, you can have an option family, where children accompanied by adults take part into 3 to 5 day camp where they get a list of works to do. Also, to take part in this project, donation is required, and this donation is spent on supporting people in this camp, like buying meals, paying for housing, and so on. So it's a mini camp, 3 to 5 days max. Mainly it's 3 days, where children work and take part in different kinds of interesting activities. Well, depending on the location of the camp, it can be different kind of fun activities, like boating, or taking part in tours. As for types of volunteering activities, it can be archaeology, construction, different events, farming, gardening, agricultural skills, research, and so on. So any person interested in any spheres can take part, and they can get whatever they want from this program. As for organizational matters, there is one head, the so-called group leader, and in the slide you have the requirements to such a leader. Well, this person needs to have some experience in taking part labor holidays, some organizational and communication skills. The description of what they do: they take care of the group, managing volunteers, delegating tasks, planning events on site, and conducting different kind of activities. As for the conditions, the same conditions for all the team leaders. They get reimbursements of all the costs to do with transfer, cell phone connections, housing, and so on, and minimum time for which they have to be there is 1 to 2 weeks. National trust studies. The thing is that in the UK they have very interesting practice, and every year they create a rating of organizations, including the non-governmental organizations, in which both employees and volunteers work. And so they create this rating of how comfortable it is to work in this organization. And National Trust, for many, many years, stays within top 10 of such organizations. So it's very prestigious. And in 2018, National Trust carried out an annual volunteer survey, and 97% of volunteers were satisfied with the job that they did with National Trust, and 94% would be recommending volunteering in National Trust to their friends and relatives. And National Trust gives different preferences to volunteers after they've worked for over 40 volunteering hours. So they can attend different workshops for free, visit some museums, and so on, that are supported by the National Trust. And in 1931, a similar organization was created in Scotland, National Trust for Scotland, and you can also take part in the activities of these organizations, familiarizing yourselves with their volunteering activities. And there is a key definition of who volunteer is. Volunteer is a person who voluntarily does a job for the fund for free, without caring about financial benefit or any other benefits, material benefits. And when we were studying together with our colleagues what the difference is between understanding of volunteers in France and UK, and unlike in Russia, in UK and France, you won't find a single document giving the definition for volunteering. And many organizations explain what volunteering is to the organizing, like working for free and so on, but they get the volunteer attached to their organization. So you're a volunteer that who does work for our organizations. So You can learn more about philosophy of volunteering on the website in this organization. And there is such a phrase there: the volunteering should be tiresome. We have a broad range of projects all over Scotland that are good for all kinds of ages. That's why we have volunteers between 4 to 94 years of age. And this organization runs based on the same principles and similar to the National Trust. It's corporate volunteering, family volunteering, child volunteering, and for a number of decades, they are running well and work with volunteers. They have different methodological guidelines, and having analyzed them, we have taken some key principles of working with volunteers that they follow. It should be partnership, openness, topicality, objectivity, and confidentiality. Here, in the slide, you can see the quote from National Trust for Scotland guidelines that addresses the volunteers, asking them to follow these rules. Helping an organization to implement its objectives and tasks, supporting a good relationship with our volunteers, following the teamwork principles, working with volunteers and employees under the leadership of the manager or coordinator of volunteering activities, respect and protect the historical and cultural heritage sites that are under the auspices of this organization, demonstrating high standards of work, to be responsible and reliable, and maintaining confidentiality. So we stay within the same geography. If you remember, we were talking about the UK. We have studied the National Trust activity, and now we are moving on to the second organization, which is also very important and very powerful in the country, is English Heritage Organization. And here in the slide, you can see the screenshot from its website where they say the following things. There are many ways for you to take care of our heritage. You can become volunteer in the English Heritage, undertaking the responsibility in taking care of a specific historical site. You can also carry out different kinds of promoting activities. Everything depends on how much free time you have and how much of this time you on developing and promoting the ideas of our country's heritage, well, the UK heritage. As for the volunteering numbers in English Heritage, here in the slide you can see the dynamic. According to annual reports of English Heritage, you can see the growth in the number of volunteers. If in 2012 it was around 800 people, by 2015 it doubled. Of course, you can compare it with the army of volunteers, but of the National Trust, but by 2021 it grew again 2 times. As for volunteers' roles, they actively promote teaching volunteers or learning volunteers. And this function was also there in the National Trust program. These are the volunteers who are active in educational activities in school, and they tell the small school children about some specific sites or several cultural heritage sites, and they talk about the importance of preserving cultural heritage, and they also explain children how they can do it and what kind of and how can they invest in it. They're also working on site or conservation placement volunteer who work only with visitors. There are administrative volunteers or visitor support volunteers and garden volunteers who work on sites, taking care of flowers, grow trees, or prepare the plants for the winter. Volunteer motivation is an interesting matter. So what this organization suggests, it says that after a volunteer has worked for over 60 hours, it's 4 to 5 months of volunteering. The volunteer receives a certificate that they worked for this amount of hours, and together with certificate, they get a pass. And certificate together with pass allows volunteers to visit museums, galleries for free. So visiting all the sites that are supported by the English heritage. As for the award, it's a very interesting story. In 2011, this organization has created an award. It's called English Heritage Angel Awards. And they have 4 nominations, and taking part in the competing for this award can you can be of any age, and I'll tell you about the conditions. But before that, I'll talk about what kind of nominations you have there. There's an award for input in saving or preserving top sites or buildings, for input into saving the objects of English industrial heritage, for unique mastership showed during saving the cultural heritage site, and for the best input in saving other monuments included into the list of English heritage. Historical buildings and monuments, landscape objects, cultural landscapes, and so on. So when you apply for a nomination, when you submit your documents, the works in your cultural website should be coming to a close for the organization to be able to evaluate what you've managed to accomplish within the project. The second requirement is for these works to happen solely in the English heritage sites that are within the list. And they update those lists annually. And number 3, the information that you submit should be reliable, because all the data is being checked. And moreover, they highlight that before they make the decision on the winner of English Heritage Angel Awards, the results of this process are not to be revised. And there are around 16 competitors eventually, and they select the winner in every nomination out of 4 respective shortlisted candidates. And it's happening in a very nice atmosphere, and the results are being published in the news. So with this, we complete with the UK, and we move on from the UK to France. And we can tell you that in the 60s, in France, one of the key non-commercial organizations appears there that managed to do a lot during these years, not only to develop cultural and historical heritage in France, but they did a lot for developing the volunteer movement in France and also creating guidelines for volunteering in cultural heritage preservation. So we are talking about Rampart Association. And here you can see the slide on this organization. And there's an explanation that starting from 1966, Rampart is working on making the heritage everyone's business. And under the auspices of Rampart, there are 180 local associations, and they often initiate different kinds of projects and programs involving volunteers. Of course, we are talking here about international volunteer camps. And in the course of the year, over 10,000 people take part in their programs of cultural heritage preservation. And we saw this statistic that every fifth French person took throughout at one point of life took part in such a program. So talking about their activities. Rampart, starting from the 60s, run international summer camps. And they take place only in summer. And these international camps attract students from all over the world. And the main requirements is that you have to be older than 18, but not older than 25, so 18 to 25 years old. And the main requirement is language knowledge. Good English and French language is preferable to avoid any issues with communication.
So Rampart organizes camps itself and provides methodological support to local associations in France. Local associations who decide to have an international volunteer camp places an ad on its website, and each volunteer may read about it and learn the following information: where the international volunteer camp will take place, what are the mandatory requirements to volunteers, what is the admission fee. So these international volunteer camps require a certain admission fee. Some camps require 180 euro or sometimes even 340 euro. So each association establishes such an admission fee depending on its needs, and for that the association provides accommodation and meals or meals. And the organizers emphasize that they don't pay costs of travel to the volunteer camp and from the volunteer camp. It looks like they don't have their mobility volunteer program. So, because sometimes in Russia, we do have reimbursement of travel costs. In France, it is different. Volunteers pay an admission fee, they pay for their travel costs, and they are provided with meal and accommodation. The organizers clearly define the accommodation conditions. It could be tents, or it may be required to bring a sleeping bag with you, because you may have a unique chance to sleep under the open skies, to enjoy the starry skies of France in the summer. Or you may have to live in some administrative building, a school, or maybe you will live in a family, in some local family. So this is the information about the camp, and I read this information 2 years ago So please pay attention. One of the municipalities offers the following conditions for accommodation of volunteers in this type of a camp. Well, first of all, the age should be of a volunteer should be at least 18. It's a tent camp with toilets, hot water, shower rooms, and tourist parkings. Also, the program, the agenda of the camp is listed. It is usually standard. If it's a 1-week camp for volunteers, then you will have to work for 5 days and 2 days off. They work every day from 4 to 5 hours a day, and on weekends, the hosts, the organizers, provide some tours, some excursions, and engage local people in these tours, because those camps is not a business of a single municipality, but also the community, the local people who are interested to preserve their cultural heritage of their local territory. So you can read in great detail about the camp, including the information about accommodation, program, and everything else. So on business days, when volunteers work, they will be offered different types of activities. For example, some activities are very popular. So volunteers are offered to gain some skills, for example, processing of stone or making things of clay. So usually there is some educational ingredient in the volunteer camp. And one more interesting thing, if you decide to become a volunteer of such an international volunteer camp, in France, for example, you will not have to think whether you have any special skills, professional skills, competences. The hosts, the organizers usually say any student can come to work for us if he or she meets the requirements and ready to pay the admission fee, and training will be given on site. For example, on the first day of the camp, the hosts give master classes, trainings for people to train their skills and understand what they should do and what types of activities they will be engaged in. So, to answer the question, who manages volunteer camps and its operation, there are usually two important leaders: an animator and a technical coordinator. A technical coordinator is responsible for volunteer training and volunteer activities themselves at a given site. Because to prepare such a site and define the cultural heritage site is a lengthy process, a lot of meticulous work. And interestingly, this cultural heritage site must be insured against volunteers, because volunteers may also cause damage. Even if they do some volunteer work, they can cause damage to that cultural heritage site. As to the other manager, leader, who is an animator is responsible for comfortable living of volunteers. The animator resolves any conflicts, ensures volunteer engagement in entertainment activities. So to become such an animator or technical coordinator, you need to meet certain requirements. So potential candidates should, for example, be or should have some experience in a similar volunteer camp, but as a participant, not an animator or technical coordinator. Also, animators and technical coordinators will have to take training to be able to perform their roles, and as a result, they're granted certificates or passports that verify their and certify their qualifications and skills. So this is a job description of the animator, and I think we covered that already. So we will not stop at this slide, just to give you a few seconds to read and review the slide. About services for volunteers. This is important and interesting. What is offered to the volunteers by hosts of international volunteer camps? First of all, it is accommodation, and accommodation can be different. I mentioned it, and the organizers are supposed to explain to the volunteers the conditions of living to avoid any uncomfortable situations and surprises when a volunteer expected to live in a tent camp and eventually it turns out that he or she will have to just sleep in a sleeping bag. So all information should be open, should be provided in advance for volunteers to arrive ready and informed to understand the conditions of accommodation. Volunteers are insured, they are provided with meals, training, and entertainment. As to meals, there might be some nuances here. The volunteers, if they're given food products, they can cook themselves, or the hosts may provide 3 meals a day to volunteers. But you want to know more, all the details of the services for volunteers. The information is usually provided in the program. There are UNESCO guidelines explaining what type of services should be provided to volunteers, what type of meals. If a volunteer is a vegan, your special requirements and nutritional needs should be taken care of. So volunteer roles in those international volunteer camps organized by Remfart. So entertainment, educational events, activities around heritage, cultural heritage sites, could be construction, crafts, it could be restoration and archaeological findings. As to the ratio of men and women, so basically there is an equal distribution across young women and young men, 47 girls and 33 young men. And this is one of the main principles of organizing volunteer camps. They say that the volunteer group should be between 14 to 15 people, and the gender split should be equal, 50-50 approximately. So let's have a look at the statistics of 2018. 75% of cultural heritage sites were restored in rural areas thanks to volunteers, and 25% were restored in the city boundaries. There is research performed by Rampart itself in 2018 about the ratio of French volunteers and international volunteers in international volunteer camps. So foreign volunteers account for 14% and French volunteers accounted for 86%. So please pay attention at this interesting slide about volunteer motivation. So the survey showed the motivation of volunteers, what prompted volunteers to participate in international volunteer camps. As far as French volunteers are concerned, everything is pretty straightforward. As to international volunteers, it is interesting to understand why people decided to pay a fee and travel costs to come and help cultural heritage site preservation in a foreign country. So let's have a look at the right-hand side of the slide. So why did foreign volunteers decide to come to restoration camps in France? Number one, meet new friends. Number two, participate in an important restoration project. Number three, gain new skills. learn about the region and country, be useful, and finally, language practice. What about French volunteers? Let's have a look at the left-hand side of this slide. So 71%, they want to take part in an important project to restore cultural heritage of their own country. So the majority of people, 71%, want to restore their cultural heritage, the French cultural heritage. 65% meet new friends, 64% be useful, 43% learn about their region and country, 24% have good vacation, and 7% language practice. Also interesting. Only 7% want to come to an international volunteer camp to practice a foreign language. So Rampart doesn't always organize international summer camps, volunteer camps. This organization works around the year, and it develops interesting volunteer programs, and it engages unemployed, migrants, and even disabled people. So basically, they offer inclusive programs, no barrier programs, in order to maintain the French cultural heritage. There are also quite a few programs for family volunteering and corporate volunteering. Rampart also offers volunteer vacancies for families with children. This might be interesting as well for Russian volunteer organizations. So we're moving towards the end of our lecture. Let us discuss one more entity, History Corps in the US. So we're now moving to the US. But before I speak about this, I forgot to give you one important comment. Starting 2020, we have encountered the pandemic, which changed our lives. Pandemic is associated with isolation, lockdown, and this certainly affected volunteer activity and international volunteer camps. So last year, in 2020, when the first volunteer camp was hosted, IVAPIC, so the president of Rampart, his name is Monsieur Dufour, he was asked one question. How did you organize those international volunteer camps in the summer of 2020 due to restrictions? And he said that in 2020, they were able to host or to implement 70% of all projected volunteer programs, but they changed approach to summer volunteer camps. They reduced the number of participants up to 8 people. Also, they ensured social distancing, sanitation of tools that the volunteers used. Also, they changed some food processing procedures, etc. So they decided not to cancel the events, not to cancel international volunteer camps in the summer. They simply adapted the operation of those camps to the pandemic times. So now let's go back to the US. This is the fourth entity that we discuss, History Corps. History Corps. This is the youngest entities that we have surveyed today. So this is also a volunteer entity in the area of cultural heritage preservation. It was born in 2003. In 2007, it was officially registered. It also promotes similar ideas, volunteer engagement, regardless of their skills and background, regardless of their competences. So they say they need all volunteers and ready to work with them. What is so special about this entity? This entity organizes different programs and projects, but it also organizes small volunteer camps. They last 5 days only, and we will also have a look at the terms and conditions of participation in those camps. As to the volunteer hours, remember, this is a new entity compared to the National Trust in the UK, for example. So from 2009 to 2028 to 2018, more than 150,000 volunteer hours were spent on implementation of various programs. So please pay attention to the picture. You see the diversity of volunteers in terms of age, and these are spirited people, spirited community of volunteers who wanted to contribute to this organization. Let's have a look at the principles of operation of those 5-day camps. So the age limit is starting from 14 years of age. The volunteers need to take care of uniforms, warm clothing, and everything. So the number of groups, or the size of the groups, are from 6 to 8, depending on the activity they're going to perform. So the hosts provides tools. The hosts provide tools, meal, and accommodation. And separately, there are no admission fees. It is free of charge. So who is responsible for organizing shifts and groups? There is a project manager and there is a group manager. So a project manager is responsible for analysis of all costs. Well, he recruits volunteers, coordinates their activities on site, and the group organizer is responsible for food.
What kind of volunteers housing options they are? Well, they can be different, and organizers specify these options when they give the description. It can be tents, it can be trailers, or so-called houses on wheels, or it can be some specific housing with the roof where you need to bring a sleeping bag. Typical camp program looks like this. Day 1, volunteers come, they get their housing, they meet each other, they meet the staff, and they get safety briefing and discuss the camp program. And the second, third, fourth, and fifth days, it's the same. It's always breakfast, discussing plans for the day, some briefing, conservation works, lunch break, conservation works, break, and then again work and dinner and free time. And they also do all kinds of work activities like excursions or tours. And on the last day, it's packing and so on, and then leaving. And we have those who are organized volunteers amongst our viewers. And this organization, Petroglyphs, evaluates the complexity of volunteering activities. And every volunteer who goes for the hard option can well knows what expects. So these are the icons specifying how complex their work is when they want to take part in history corps activities, and they can assess their physical abilities, how physically and morally ready they are. So the green is something that can be done by any person. Yellow, it's an intermediary one. They involve some more complex activities like working on stairs, moving some heavy stuff, and works on the roof or on foundations. And here in the slide, you can see a picture, and here you can see that this type of activities that's there is yellow. And there is a red section specifying some hard activities. There are not that many projects involving that, but there are always people who want it. These projects are implemented in some remote places. And from the campsite, you have to move to some B side, carry out some works. And after 6 working hours, you have to go back, walking for several kilometers, for instance. And organizers always highlight that when you have a red section project, the volunteers should be prepared that they'll be carrying heavy stuff when walking to the working site and back. I won't give you much details on the rest, on the rest of what they do, but just an overview. They have been organizing, and they were evaluating the epidemic situation with COVID-19, and they were adjusting accordingly, like having separate tents instead of one general tent, some organizing meals, ensuring PPE availability, and the volunteers have to wear cloth masks, and they have to wash. Volunteers have to wash them daily, and so on. And there are some functional requirements to functional zoning of the camp. Everything should be marked, and housing quarters, working areas, and technical areas have to be also marked. And this is an example of how they developed a number of algorithms of what COVID symptoms are detected in one of the volunteers. If one volunteer is sick, you have to do that. If several volunteers get sick, you have to do that, like close the projects. If volunteers are healthy, but the head of the project got sick, who will be replaced? You know, there are a lot of options of what to do when certain conditions happen. And if organizers of volunteering activities get questions, I think we'll be very happy to share those materials. And with this, I conclude, and thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be happy to reply to your questions. Natalia, thank you very much. We have several questions. So what do we start with? Participants are interested in the following. What do you start with when you want to revive some heritage site? For instance, there is a heritage site and they want to start with restoration. What should they start with? Who should they go to? Is there a method or set of guidelines? Yeah, I understand what you're talking about. I think this information is available at the Terms of Fest festival website, you know that they are involved in this kind of activities. So when you choose this object, you need to understand its status, whether it's a cultural heritage status. You have to align it with local administration. You can just bring people together and get some paints and paint something. So there should be a whole sequence of administrative stages or actions. You need to sign respective papers to start working on it. And if you need it, you can create this kind of algorithm, and I can forward it to Milena, the organizer of the event, and I want to warn you straight away, but that if you found some site, you shouldn't start working right away. You should start with planning, working on the outlook and so on. Yes, thank you very much. Everything should be approved and authorized. Next question. Do we have such funds in Russia that support such projects, and does the state support that? Of course, it can be grants. For instance, we have Russian Cultural Center. They have nominations, and there is a history and cultural sites preservation community, and they win different grants. As for NGOs, yes, we have such organizations in Russia. For instance, Common Deed, Общее дело, and the fund Krokhin's Foundation, managed by Nordna Tugayeva, and they are posting it on Facebook, how they are restoring the village church. You just need to Google NGOs on NGOs on restoration. Now we have a big list. There is an organization, Rural Church, that specializes on restoring the churches in rural areas. Thank you. And another question. The coast Russian practices of restoring historical cultural sites by NGOs or volunteers. Well, I don't know about the accumulated information. I think maybe we should publish this kind of collection of good practices. As for interesting stories and examples, well, I've mentioned that already. There was this example of volunteering idea that transformed into big movement. Anur Kukayeva's initiative. When she was a student, she visited that village, Krokhin village, and because of intentional flooding, this village was abandoned, and she saw very damaged cathedral, and that cathedral changed her whole life, and she decided to dedicate her life to restoring this cathedral. And for many years, for over 10 years, she is working on that. She started with just a few volunteers, but as of now, there are a lot of people, and every summer they organize tours to Krokhina village, and she posts that on Facebook, how you find money. And this year she didn't win any funds, and there were different donations collected, buying different materials like gravel and construction materials that are required for restoring this temple. And now they are at the stage of restoring the village sign, so you can monitor what they do. And there are also open vacancies for next year. But for me, she is a very outstanding example of how initiative of a single person changed lives, her life, the lives of people who are around her. And it led to an increase in the number of people who care, who spend their vacations going to Krokhino and working there. Thank you, Natalia. Yeah, I also recommend everyone to have a look at Krokhino, and I'm sure that many know Tom Sawyer Fest. Also, you can check out the portal dobro.ru, checking the best Russian practices, and there you'll be able to find information on cultural heritage restoration objects. Another question came: what can volunteers do if they are not allowed to take part in restoration? Well, I can respond to that because I also organize such volunteers. Volunteers can do construction and refurbishment. Yes, that's true. So we are out of questions, so we'll say goodbye. And Natalia, I want to tell you thanks for such an overview of foreign practices. It was really interesting, and it's very motivating for me learning about those camps and maybe going to a different country, taking part in such a project, feeling the part of preserving the cultural heritage site in a different country or global heritage site maybe. Thank you very much, and I want to thank our viewers who are listening and asking their questions. And I want to remind you that tomorrow at 10 a.m. we meet here at the same link and we carry on. So thank you once again, and we say goodbye. Thank you. We have a lot of projects and programs, and I hope that your initiatives will get implemented in real life. And hopefully that next time I'll be talking not only about Anur Kukaeva only, but maybe about someone of you who became famous for their activities. Yes, we do count on that our viewers, that our volunteers will implement such kind of projects. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone, and see you tomorrow.